So I want to talk about manifestation today. And I want to start off by saying something that might surprise you coming from someone who has a master's degree in consciousness and human potential, Vedic science. And it's that I think the law of attraction is real. I think The Secret, it actually pointed to something. I think vision boards, they work. I do use them. And I think affirmations, they have genuine value. But, because there's always a but, there's something almost nobody's talking about in the manifestation space. And I think, in my humble opinion, most people who try, these things get inconsistent results at best, or they give up entirely, or maybe just get completely turned off when they hear the word manifestation because there's an obsession with it. But I think once you understand it, everything about how the 3D world comes into the physical world starts to make a lot more sense. I'll start with a story because who doesn't like a good story to illustrate something? So a long time ago, I was really struggling in the relationship department, and honestly, it wasn't that long ago. I've always had trouble in the dating world. It's just how it went for me. And at some point, I went to a mentor of mine and I told her about something I'd been doing. I've been writing down everything I wanted in a future partner. Things like a kind heart. I wrote down generosity, resilience, patience, passion, hardworking, forgiving. And one of my favorite on my wish list was non-confrontational and harmonious. And the list went on. And, I had taken that list and I took it and I pasted it up on my mirror. And so I saw it, multiple times a day. I read it multiple times a day. And I told my mentor this is what I was doing. Still having trouble with the relationships. And she looked at me and she said, well, that's pretty cool. Like, how's that working out for you? And I kind of smiled and looked at her and I was like, well, not so good. And she paused, in her, compassionate way. And she asked me a question that caught my attention. And she said, how many of those qualities, John, do you actually have yourself? Now really think about it. Don't answer now. I don't really want to hear your list, but think about it. When you have that answer, why don't you try to make a new list? A list of all the best qualities you genuinely believe you possess. And, just include the ones you truly admire of yourself. Leave off the ones you don't actually, like. And when you have that list, put that one on your mirror. And so I went home and I made that list. And to be honest, it was quite a bit shorter than the list I had been putting up. But I put it up on the mirror. And 6 months later, I ended up meeting my wife. Now, I want to sit with that, what actually happened, there, because it's easy to hear that kind of a story and think, oh, that's nice, John. You focused on yourself and good things happened. But I think what was actually happening goes much deeper than that. When I was writing the list of everything I wanted in a partner, I was working at the surface level. I was trying to attract something from the level of wanting. And, sometimes I think wanting, it carries with it this energy of lack, of not yet having, of something being missing. And the law of resonance is very precise about this, introducing a new law. And you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are at the deepest levels, and that's the law of resonance. And so while I was reading that list, every morning in the mirror, the deeper levels of my inner world were broadcasting something completely different. And it was a belief that I wasn't enough, a pattern of showing up in relationships from a contracted place, a history of attracting dynamics that pretty much reflected exactly who I was underneath it all. Not who I wanted to attract, but who I actually was. Which come to find out, I lacked in a lot of the things I was originally hoping for, to be dead honest. And when my mentor politely redirected me to focus on who I actually was, I think something shifted deeper, at a deeper level. And again, 6 months later, the outer reality reflected that shift. And I don't think that's coincidence. That's honestly the law of correspondence doing exactly what it does. So let me name what happened in that story because I think it illustrates two ideas that are honestly really important more important than anything that The Secret ever taught. And together they might explain everything the law of attraction, got right, but at the same time, everything is missing. And so the first is the law of resonance, and that is you don't attract what you want as much as you want something. You attract what you are at the deepest level. And the second is the law of correspondence, which I just mentioned, as within, so without. And your outer world basically is always reflecting your inner world back to you. Not your surface thoughts, not your affirmations, not what's even on your vision board, but your actual inner world, the level you're genuinely operating from. And these two ideas, they work together. The law of resonance suggests what you might be pulling towards you, and the law of correspondence suggests what your current life might already be showing you about the level you're at. I think together they point, to something, that real change doesn't start out there. It starts at the root. And that's what I'm going to explore for the rest of this video, is diving into some of these concepts, telling a few stories, and just playing some self-discovery with you. All right, so let's go deeper into the law of resonance, because I think this idea is what's missing from most manifestation philosophies. The law of correspondence is also one of the oldest principles in human understanding, as within, so without. Your outer reality, it's a direct reflection of your inner world. Not your surface thoughts, like I said before, not your affirmations, not what you put on your vision board. Of course, as I mentioned, as I started, those things do help, but your actual inner world, the beliefs running underneath it all, the emotional patterns, the level of consciousness you and I are operating from. And this seems to show up in every area of life, not just relationships. So think about money, for example. If someone grew up absorbing the belief that money is hard to come by, that's, that there's never enough, that wealthy people are somehow different from them, those beliefs live at a level much deeper than the conscious, thoughts. And no matter how many times, you or I affirm abundance or visualize a full bank account, the deeper level might be broadcasting something different. And the outer reality keeps reflecting that. Another example to think about would be health. Not one that really enters the manifestation, field, but at the same time, it's super relevant. So for example, someone who believed at a deep level that their body is fragile, that illness is inevitable, those beliefs shape perception. And every symptom, every sensation, every piece of health information they encounter, the outer experience of health very well could be mirroring inner beliefs about health as well. And so this is what the law of correspondence seems to be pointing at. And this is where most manifestation approaches might be falling short, in my opinion, because it's working at the surface, trying to change the reflection of it all without actually changing what's creating that reflection in the first place. So here's the best way I can explain it. Imagine you're at a restaurant and you're sitting at the table looking at the menu and you decide, I want some sushi, it looks good, and so you order sushi. But what you don't know is that the manager in the back already decided for the kitchen is that they're just serving pizza for tonight. So no matter how clearly you order sushi, no matter how many times you order it, pizza keeps showing up at the table. And that's what might be happening with most deliberate manifestation work, because obviously everything's manifesting by itself if you're not conscious of it. So deliberate manifestation. The surface mind is ordering sushi, The deeper levels of the mind, the subconscious beliefs, those emotional patterns, the level of being you and I are actually operating from, the manager in back is that's in back is canceling the order and sending out pizza instead. And until we go deeper than the surface of the mind, until we actually address what the manager is doing back there, the pizza keeps showing up. No matter how good your vision board is. Now, here's another way to think about this. A lot of deliberate manifestation work is like trying to plant a tree on a thick layer of concrete. You can plant the seed, you can water it, you can put it in the sunlight, you can believe in it completely with your whole heart and soul, but the concrete is still there. The roots have nowhere to go, and without roots, the tree, it's not going to grow. So some trees, inevitably, the resilient ones, will find a crack in the concrete and force their way through. And at the same time, vision boards and affirmations work the same way. Sometimes they do break through regardless of deeper patterns. But a lot of the time, the deeper patterns end up winning. It's the concrete underneath the surface of the mind that's contracting everything on the surface, and the tree never really has a chance to take root. What might need to actually happen is a need to remove the concrete, giving the roots direct access to the soil and letting the tree grow from the ground up. That's what working at the root level might actually mean. Now, at the same time, I want to share something that's a little more uncomfortable, because I think the law of correspondence, it doesn't just point at the good things showing up. It might explain everything, honestly, including the things we wish weren't showing up. Over the years in different work situations, for example, I've noticed a consistent pattern. I tend to attract really strong-headed individuals, onto my teams, people who they want to do things the way they want to do them, who resist being told or pointed in any direction, or like, here's what maybe you should do. People who become actually straight up, if I think about it, defiant, when they're actually feeling controlled. And for a long time, I thought this was bad luck, or maybe this is just the reality of managing people, which that concept definitely carries weight. But recently I stopped and really looked at it, especially when thinking about this video, and I couldn't help, but see myself, the strong-headedness, the resistance to authority, the desire to do things my own way. And so the point being is that the law of correspondence, it doesn't lie. The outer world keeps showing me something about my inner world. And that's it's not comfortable to see. It would be easier to blame the individual, to blame myself, but the law of correspondence keeps, basically pointing in the same direction here. And I think that's worth sitting with, not from a place of self-criticism, but from a place of genuine curiosity. Because when you and I see, and can acknowledge what the mirror might be showing us, we can actually begin to work with what's going on. We can ask questions like, what does this pattern say about the level I'm operating from? And what would shift in me that might shift what keeps showing up out there? If I do some inner work. And that's a comfortable question, and that's not a comfortable question at all, but it's a genuinely useful one, I think, to sit with and to play with. Because at the end of the game, end of the day, I'm calling it a game. At the end of the day, life is a game, and manifestation really is this. We're learning how to play life. So what might actually work? Well, here's what I want to bring something up from neuroscience that I find genuinely interesting. Not because it proves anything like definitively, or I pretend that I'm a neuroscientist, because I'm not. I don't think we can say anything is certain in the field of manifestation either. It's a matter of experimentation and real world, experience. But one of the things I learned recently is that the brain has a system called the reticular activating system. And I think I learned it a long time ago, but of course I forgot. And what it appears to be is a filter, and from what I recall reading, it filters roughly 11 million bits of information hitting our senses every single second, and it parses that down to roughly 40 bits that can actually reach our conscious awareness. So 11 million bits down to 40 every single second. And what seems to determine, what gets through the filter, if you think about it, it's our inner state, our beliefs, our emotional patterns, the level that we're operating from, which might mean our inner world is reflecting what we're able to perceive as possible in our outer world. Someone operating from a scarcity, mindset might genuinely not be able to perceive the same opportunities as somebody that's operating with the beliefs and the assumptions of abundance, not because the opportunities aren't there, because of course they are, but because the filter might not be letting that information through. And so now, whether or not this fully explains what the law of resonance and the law of correspondence is pointing to, I honestly don't know. What I do find interesting is that modern neuroscience mixed with ancient wisdom traditions that I've been talking about, like Vedic science, they seem to be gesturing at something very similar. That the level you're operating from shapes what you see, and what you see shapes what becomes possible. And that's not even, partially true. It's well, I should say, if that is actually partially true, it suggests that the surface level of manifestation might have a ceiling, that goes deeper than most people realize. The vision board, the affirmations, these might be working at the level of the fruit, which is the same level as the outcome, when in fact the real leverage might be at the level of the root. And so let me bring you back to my own life, because of course I love talking about myself. Who doesn't? But I tried to build something like this channel twice before, and both times I really didn't get anywhere. And I believe it's because I was operating from a fixed mindset that was telling myself if I wasn't good at something immediately, I'd get overwhelmed and I'd stop, rather than having a growth mindset. And so the outer result, it reflected that. It reflected my inner state perfectly. No channel. And so just lack of confidence, it reflected frustration. And now here in 2026, I think something shifted. And I'm genuinely enjoying the journey of building this, even though I have no subscribers, if you notice. But I don't think that matters, because, showing up consistently, I'm learning more of a growth mindset. I'm finding real satisfaction, honestly, in the process of it itself. Although I still get frustrated. I'm not perfect. I still have a temper, and I still get frustrated when you look and you put a video out and there's no views. But, it's not just in the outcome. Honestly, I think it's in the doing of it and building it, and the outer result is starting to reflect that. Not because I'm forcing it, not because I made a better vision board, about having a successful YouTube channel, but I think because in the inner levels of my being, something has shifted. I'm not perfect, but if I get back to the analogies, the concrete that's been blocking my ability to keep going is starting to break up and crumble and move. And so those roots appear to be actually being able to take roots into the ground and whatnot. And the law of correspondence might be doing what it always does, showing me who I am at the deepest levels, which is someone who's going to stay consistent and push through whatever it takes to help people and build a community on this, YouTube channel. And at the same time, have courage with some of the haters as well, because of course that's out there as well. And I've already experienced it. All right, so here's what I want to leave you with. And I want to offer this as a question rather than a definitive conclusion. The next time manifestation isn't working for you in your preferred favor, and that's like, the conscious manifestation, because obviously everything's manifesting as it is. Before you make a better vision board, before you write a stronger affirmation, even before you, visualize harder, what if you experimented a bit? You ask yourself a different question. What is the deepest level of my inner world actually broadcasting right now? Not what am I thinking, not what do I want, but what am I actually being at the root level? And I'll say that again, what am I actually being at the root level? It's a question that sounds odd, because I think it's worth examining. If the law of correspondence is actually pointing at something real, if the outer world is genuinely reflecting the inner world in some meaningful way, then the most powerful place to work, again, I'll keep saying it, it's not out there, it's in here. It's in here. I sound preachy, but it's important. And not because I've proven that, not because anyone has fully proven that, but because the ancient traditions, if you really look at it, like Vedic science and in the modern neuroscience that I just point out, and there's a growing number of people's lived experiences, they all seem to be gesturing or pointing in the same direction. And I think that's worth at least experimenting with. What would happen if you went deeper than the vision board, all the way to the root, and just noticed what changed? Not because someone told you it works, but because you were curious enough to find out for yourself. That's the experiment, I'm running in my own life. It's a fun one. I'm still in the middle of it, right alongside you.